Welcome to the last of the Graeae and Disability Arts online podcast, Disability And. Before we welcome Mind the Gap Theatre. This month, Disability Arts Online Senior Editor Colin Hambrook chats with Graeae's former Associate Director Nickie Miles-Wildin about the last 3 years. This podcast contains some strong language.
Hi, and welcome to the Disability And podcast number 34, which I'm guessing it will be Disability and Podcasting, because I'm here with the wonderful Nicky Miles-Wildin, who has been the chief podcaster from the Graeae side. Hi, Nicky. It's great to meet up with you on the podcast at last.
It is, Colin. It's fantastic. I can't believe there's been 34 of them. It's just epic. And yeah, I don't think it should stop. I think it should keep going.
Disability Arts Online, certainly we intend to keep the podcast going, and we're about to enter into a podcasting partnership with Mind the Gap Theatre in Bradford. So
fantastic.
I'm really pleased about that. You know, it's been I've been very passionate ever since the beginning of Disability Arts Online to try and find a space to be more inclusive of the learning disability arts community. And so I'm really pleased they've picked up the mantle. So, Nicky, how has it been for you? It's been 3 years, and I've loved hearing your voice on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Colin. And same goes. 3 years. Gosh, time flies, doesn't it, when you're in a pandemic? And to think it kind of marks the start of my journey with Graeae as associate director, and now I've moved on, and so it's kind of like been a big part of my Graeae time as well. It's been fantastic over the 3 years, like the range of guests that we've both had on, and other people have come on and presented the podcast as well, and kind of just really reminded me of the disabled community, the disabled arts community as well, and the importance of it, the relevance of it, and particularly during times when none of us were really going outside, and still, some of us still aren't. It's just been really valid to have our voices still there.
And I've really enjoyed hearing voices of disabled artists that I respect and admire and love. Who've been such a huge part of my life. I've loved the range, everything from kind of deep, kind of philosophical topics to obviously a lot of the arts, through to the Paralympics and all aspects of life that we're part of as disabled people.
And definitely, and I think it is just that thing of having the opportunity to share our stories, our perspectives on the world and on art as well. And it is quite rare, isn't it, where there's that feeling that we can all get together and share work. And I think this podcast has enabled us to still have that feeling of being, down the pub with each other, or those times when there are those big disability arts festivals, like Unlimited at the South Bank, Dada Fest and Liberty, where there was that feeling that you could go along to that and you felt like you'd see loads of people you knew, and that sense of being able to meet up. And I suppose at a time when we haven't had that, and even before that, actually, this podcast has felt like that way of remembering we're there. And because the podcasts have been sort of that element, like you're having a chat, it's enabled you to feel like you are there, you're hearing about other people's work, and it's been really enlightening and really exciting.
Absolutely. Well, I was very kind of nervous going into the whole kind of arena, and I didn't know how I'd I'd be up for the challenge, sort of having the sort of brain that kind of is very stop-start and doesn't really work very well at the best of times. The kind of stress of being in the moment, being recorded on a podcast. I thought I'd find it really hard, but actually I've really enjoyed it. And it, it doesn't really matter, does it?
No, I think one thing I found, I don't know about you, was I was always worried, like, are we going to have enough material? Like, am I going to be able to ask the right questions, steer the conversation? And then, like, feeling sorry for Ian, sometimes it was editing them. Like, I think there was one that kind of went on for quite a while, like over an hour and a half. So, but it was just such a joy, like kind of getting over that nervousness to just sit and have conversations and listen and talk about people's work. Do you think that you're more comfortable with it now and have really gained skills?
Yeah. I think I've grown into it and are far less nervous than I was at the beginning, and I think it's a really kind of valuable to way of kind of introducing other accessible ways of telling the story of disability arts. We Disability Arts Online kind of started as a journal with a sort of a magazine ethic to it that was very much about writing and print. So this broadcasting has really taken us in another direction, and I think it opens up issues around disability arts and beyond disability arts for a much broader range of listeners.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's something interesting there about it being like Disability Arts Online and Graeae, this kind of partnership. How did that come about, Colin? Because you probably know more about that than I do.
The whole idea of the podcast had been something that we'd talked about at Disability Arts Online for quite a long time, at least a couple of years before we sort of launched ourselves into doing it. And that connection with Graeae has been there from the start. There's always been a strong connection between Graeae and Disability Arts Online, and they felt very much like a natural partner for us. And I'm kind of sad to see that partnership coming to an end, but I'm hoping that there'll be other ways that we can partner in the future, and I'm hoping that we can do more deaf-led work with Graeae. I think that would be great.
Yeah, I think it's been a fantastic partnership and kind of allowing kind of a real intersectionality of artists as well to come through. That feels like it's been quite key to these podcasts, and I think it's equally exciting that you're going on to work with Mind the Gap. They're just a brilliant company, and of course up in the north as well, which is what we like. But yeah, I just think it's brilliant, and I know Graeae, I've got a lot out of it as well. It's been a real sort of eclectic intersectional mix, and also a sense of honesty with all of them. And I don't know whether that's the art of a podcast, because of you are talking into the ether, really, aren't you? But they have all felt really conversational and rather than like a formal interview, and that's been quite engaging.
Absolutely, yeah. And the range of subjects has been terrific. We had the Disability and Race podcast with Alexandrina Hemsley and Deborah Williams, who has been an intellectual heavyweight and an enormously important part of my life since the 90s. Actually, I've always had a huge amount of respect and admiration for Deborah, and their podcast really kind of opened up issues around whiteness that I think we don't often think about or talk about, and actually they're really, really important to understand culturally what that means. You know, we don't usually kind of even consider our skin color in that context. And other areas that the podcasts have covered, the working class and LGBTQIA podcast that we did with Sandra Allen and Shafiq Ghafoor and Matty Kennedy and Kate Lauder, talking about the parallels with disability and queerness and how that often intersects with class. These have been really meaty subjects.
And I think that's really key as well, isn't it? Is the fact that as disabled people, we can talk about meaty subjects. Like, you know, particularly the one with Deborah and Alexandrina, like that is such a massive discussion and so much more to do there. And that exclusion of Black people from disability arts and the wider art sector. And like you say, you know, challenging us on what is meant by whiteness, you know, to understand it. It's sort of really made me reflect in my work and also in looking at disability arts as a whole. It has been very white, you know, and this is our chance to change that.
Not before time, you know. This is sort of conversation that should have been happening 20 years ago, and that you know we've kind of consistently shied away from.
Which ones have you really enjoyed, like, or ones that really stand out for you?
I've enjoyed them right from the very start when I interviewed Gobscure, who is an amazing artist. I love him intensely.
Yeah. Brilliant Gobscure. And what I've loved over the pandemic is having Zooms with them and them talking around their little garden out the back and the birds that come and visit and the beautiful kind of tree they've got in their lounge. It's, yeah, they're an amazing artist as well. And the work that I've done with them at Graeae is just, yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed the more recent podcast on sci-fi and race with Zuleika Lebeau and Kyla Harris, and that kind of opened up kind of thoughts about disability and reclaiming science fiction that I'd never considered before. I'd always thought that sort of, you know, as a bit of a negative, if I'm honest, that sort of superpower, relating it to the supercrit. But I think they opened up a much more nuanced conversation about the kind of positive parallels that can exist there.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? It's around what the different perspectives on things have been really important to hear.
Yeah, and I loved interviewing Letty McHugh, who I know you interviewed for Dada Fest towards the end of last year. You know, she's such a fantastic artist. She kind of thinks so deeply and yet clearly and kind of positively, and she really she really challenges a lot of the barriers that society kind of puts in front of us as disabled people. She does it in such a kind of gentle and nuanced and beautiful way, actually. And
also from a working class perspective, recently when I went up to visit her gallery up in Keighley, she had these brilliant banners that she'd made with the prints on, and it was all the kind of different pieces of equipment that women have used through time, or that women have been, you know, played a massive part in women's lives, in kind of homemaking as well. And it's just brilliant. And then all these little paper boats that she'd made relating to her granddad being in the Navy, and how she'd started doing origami to kind of exercise her hands, and it's turned into this wonderful piece of art. And then the work that she has with us at Dada Fest Scratch, her Anchorage exhibition, and also the one that she talked around with on the podcast about the medieval Christian manuscripts. And I think that's the Book of Hours, isn't it?
That's right.
And we there's potential for us to expand on that with Letty as well and make that a bigger piece of work. What is so interesting about Letty is that the work that she does in kind of solitude and makes solitude look and feel, I want to say sexy, but that feels the wrong word, but like that real connection to it, and that, she draws a lot on her own experiences and really brings that out in her art and takes solitude onto a public platform. Letty is definitely, I say this about every artist I work with, but definitely one to keep an eye on.
And for you, Nicky, what have been some of your highlights?
I loved talking to Jess Tom, and that moment where Matthew Pountney said to her around, use your tics as a creative language kind of generating machine, and that being a moment for Jess of just going, oh yeah, like not hiding them away and having that kind of creative value in her tics. And I think with Jess, there's always that reminder for us to examine disability oppression and the real impact of it on our lives. She's somebody that I've admired from a distance, and I always love those moments when we do get the opportunity to sit and chat. It's brilliant. And I think, Jess she's really making change, and that's important. And her blogs that have been coming out during lockdown as well have been really incredible, and still challenging society in those attitudes.
Yeah, she's magical, really, in just how articulate about the barriers that we face, she can be. I've loved watching her at Unlimiteds on, in conversation. She's just so clever and so funny, so naturally funny and engaging.
And it's brilliant to see the work that she's been doing, with Battersea Arts Centre, and making them quite a more sort of accessible venue throughout, and the work that she does with young people as well. That was a definite highlight for me. And of course, we had to talk about the lamppost as well outside Jess's house. And I think it got damaged, hadn't it? And someone had managed to save it for her, and she had it in her flat.
Yes, yeah. I wonder if it has a name other than lamppost now.
Don't know. We'll put it out there. Jess bound to be listening. What's the name of your lamppost? Sarah Gordy was another favourite. We went back years. We used to work together at Kazoom, where we did Paper People, and hearing, the kind of barriers that Sarah has faced in her work. Like, she was on Upstairs Downstairs.
She did Jellyfish at the National, didn't she?
That's it, yeah. Working with Ben Weatherall, and the work she does with like learning disabled models as well. It's just, again, just brilliant, and incredible to hear her journey and the journey of her family as well, and the impact that kind of theatre work and the arts has had on her life. It brings back so many memories, doesn't it, of like when you start talking about them, of where you were when you were recording them. Or like for me with Jess and Sarah, it was in like the living room area at Graeae, and then I think quite a lot of them then became online.
Yeah, we went into lockdown, didn't we? And it all turned into kind of Zoom recording. Were there other highlights for you?
It was great to have a chat with Jack, and he's always a brilliant voice, isn't he, for kind of champion the work of disabled artists and particularly disabled writers. I think I got a bit starstruck talking to Jack, and then also Ruth Madeley as well was another one, and particularly even more so when you're doing it on Zoom as well. It's like they're here in your house now. It feels more kind of personal.
I found it really interesting listening to Jack talking about his struggles with identifying as a disabled person and what that meant to him, and how he had that moment with I think it was during cast-offs.
With Alex Bulmer, wasn't it?
With Alex Bulmer, that's right. Yeah, and he it was her encouragement and that led to him sort of realizing that he'd found his people, as he put it. And I think that's something that's common for a lot of disabled people, that we kind of, especially, people like myself with invisible impairments, that we kind of struggle with, am I, aren't I? What does it mean? Am I a fraud? And then there's that kind of light bulb moment when you kind of connect with the idea of disability as the lived experience of barriers, and you realize, fuck, yeah, I've been facing barriers since I was a kid. It's been a constant, plethora of barriers all my life, society, and just throwing everything at me.
It is that sort of that light bulb moment, and the understanding of the social model and the impact that has on you and how you choose to identify. And for me, I didn't come across that till I was like 21, and even then the irony was that I was on a kind of disability equality awareness training weekend. It's not something you get taught at school, is it? And then, but as soon as I learned about it, for me it was like, yeah, I am disabled, own it. And like Jack was saying, he finds his people. I think that is key, isn't it? We have got a community, and for me, that's what this podcast shows. There's so many disabled artists that we need to keep getting our stories out there and our work out there, and having these brilliant discussions like Deborah and Alexandrina. Art is all about change, isn't it? And an artist having a conversation can make change as well, and that's really important. And it's something that I really hope it's helped a lot of people on their own sort of journey of discovery of disability as well.
There have been some great conversations about sort of definitions of disability art and what that means. And Claire Cunningham's a podcast on aesthetics kind of stood out for me as a, I've always loved Claire's work. She's just beautiful to watch, but also, whether she's kind of incorporating issues around religion or belief or identity into her work, there's the creative angle that she comes from, and the idea of a disability aesthetic that kind of challenges barriers that society puts in front of us, and kind of understands how important the body is as a sort of foundation for a disability aesthetic, and just what a creative idea that can be, and what a tool.
Yeah, it's really key. And yeah, big fan of Claire's work as well. And it's such a interesting conversation and dialogue to have, isn't it? And she says something around that society has dictated where women with long hair are more aesthetically pleasing than those with short hair. And you start to look at everything in society and you're like, yeah, where has that come from? And what is disability aesthetic? What's been really enlightening about these podcasts is us learning about our history as well. And how the roles of disabled people played kind of the roles of disabled people played, they were those of kind of I can't say the word. They were kind of curiosities or fools. Why can't I say fools today? But how the fools were like some of the people who could actually speak truth to power and say what they really thought to royalty. Like, how brilliant would that be today? I think the Queen would be hearing quite a lot from some of us. And how then the perception of disability went from kind of being this one of wonder to one of error in the kind of Victorian and early modern capitalist era. And then out of that grew the kind of, the medical model, the medical conception. And I think that idea of how things improving through history is sometimes false, isn't it? And that I thought was really really interesting from that podcast how, and that starts to happen the more you kind of unpack history, that disability wasn't such a bad thing or such a powerless thing, but it has definitely become that through how it's going. And been talking to one of the Dada fellows around her Arabic background, and her saying, in Arabic history, again, the disabled people just everyone fitted into society. There was no levels of hierarchy, but suddenly it's kind of, as we move through, it's starting to become that.
And I'm really glad that at Disability Arts Online we can continue to challenge that societal idea that everything's fine, and we have to just keep on. I think that struggle isn't going to go away.
Yeah, and we're kind of stronger together, aren't we? And can support each other and kind of amplify our voices. And it's funny, isn't it, when you look at it through history, where it gets better, then it drops down, gets better, and that is what I very much think the kind of disabled narrative is for stories. Really, it should be that thing of, because every day you can be not disabled till I leave my house and that I get to the tram stop and the lifts aren't working. Do you know what I mean? It's like my life is okay, then it hits a barrier, then it's okay again once the lifts are working, or I'm on the tram, but then somebody says something and that's that other barrier. Not necessarily the hero's journey, are they? Let's put it that way.
On the less serious side, I loved hearing Jackie Hagan talking about comedy and out the sprouts.
Oh, the brilliant Jackie Hagan. That dare I say it? I'd forgotten I had done that with her, but I think that was my first ever one, I think. Me and Jackie, we'd worked together, hadn't we, on the Forest of Forgotten Discos up here in Manchester, and we had great fun having a bear that farted loads, and then having an interactive game with the young people called Out the Sprout. And Jackie is just phenomenal, isn't she, as a writer, a poet, a playwright. And even her Facebook status is like every day, it's just pure comedy, like, because she's going through she's gone through quite a lot of stuff recently, but she still entertains us all on Facebook with her Facebook status. And she's just brilliant. Again, just somebody from, she says, from a working class background, and she's so articulate. She's so honest with her work, creatively playful again, and just an absolute joy. And didn't we have a weird discussion about oversized hats?
I think it started off with hats, and what hat would to describe her, and she talked about wearing a dame's hat, I think.
That was it. What? Sometimes I think, where did I come up with these questions and why?
It's great when it enters that kind of surreal world. I think Jackie's a great example of art breaking the rules, and the importance of art to break the rules, and there was quite a serious message in that as well, around how good oppressed people are at comedy in ways that the kind of straight world just doesn't embrace at all.
No, and I think it's that sense of speaking the truth, isn't it? And I think that's what Jackie does so well. Is there any more, Colin, that you would say you've really enjoyed listening to or being part of?
I found the interview that I did with Mike Faulkner about neurodiversity, I found that absolutely fascinating, because he's someone who has like 20 or 30 conversations going on in his head all at the same time, and talking to him, you get like all of those conversations coming out and just taking you in a sort of myriad of different directions. And I thought just in the way that he spoke, you really got a sense of the inside of Mike Fortner's brain, and just what an incredible place it is. And you know, and of course how he's been able to challenge that to educate people about climate change, and to kind of use his art as a form of climate activism.
And that, you know, that's particularly important, isn't it, when you feel you know, and having done some work with Mind the Gap recently, that thing of actually throughout climate change, the conversation around it, how a lot of disabled people are left out of those conversations due to the kind of the inaccessibility of the material or the language used around it. So it's great that, you know, Mike's exploring that and using his voice in there.
Are there any others of them that kind of struck you, that kind of raised a note with you?
I think what's really important is to remember like the cross art form of all of them as well. Aidan Mosby, Jennifer Gilbert talking around the definition of curator, and how that's more than just selecting a bunch of artworks and putting them on the wall or wherever and thinking, oh, that looks nice. And to thinking about it as a kind of world of storytelling. And around that feeling of to care for the artist, the work and the audience. And that, I think that's really important actually, is to think about all the work we do is like, what are people getting out of it? What do we hope that they get out of it? What's the story we're all trying to tell with the work that we're making? And I remember they made quite a valid point around how visual art by disabled artists is still perceived as a lesser quality. And I thought that really stood out for me actually, because it's very much like, is that the perception of all disability art, or more so visual art, and why is that? Because there's also something linked here, isn't there, of what if people didn't know who the artist was? Would people necessarily still have that assumption? And I think when you look back through time, a lot of artists were disabled. They had hidden impairments. But it's only now that that's coming to light, isn't it?
That hiding of disability, especially within the visual arts, has been part of the kind of discrimination that you know that we face since kind of the year dot, really, since the whole kind of Greek ideal of the perfect human body, you know, and I think in the visual arts it is harder than I think the performing arts and the whole sort of idea of the disability aesthetic, you know, the stuff that has been so close to Jenny Seeley's heart, you know, has been really, really important in you know, pushing the language and creating a depth of understanding. And I think within the visual arts that hasn't happened because the visual arts are so dependent on the patrons, who are the ones who decide who is and who isn't an artist. And there's such a kind of a history within the visual arts, especially, of language being used to just completely discombobulate and make utter nonsense of creativity, and using that as a way of creating a hierarchy and creating a kind of whole system of exclusion, really. And I think within the visual arts especially, you know, that idea of curation as storytelling is so important. And you know, there's this thing in the visual arts, isn't it, is the artwork has to speak for itself, which is, back in the 16th century when, you had hours to ponder an image, and people, it was very much about the narrative. But now, it's so important that we use art as a vehicle for storytelling, and not for just complete nonsense that abstract kind of upper up its own arsehole, really.
I think I completely agree. I mean, mine's theatre background, but I think that still says a lot to theatre of putting our stories out there, and I think it is, isn't it? It always comes down to money, capitalism, of like who's got the money, and also the gatekeepers in these places, and what do they value as art? And I think I was talking about this the other day with someone around that the importance of art to disabled artists feels even more important than potentially it could do to a non-disabled artist, because it's us. We're really putting ourselves out there, aren't we? With this is who we are. This is the impact that society has on us. So there's quite a lot of, and I know we all don't really like this word, but there is a lot of vulnerability there with what we're doing, which with that then comes a lot of care and a lot of passion. So when art, visual art, or whatever can feel disregarded, it feels like quite a personal attack. We're using art to challenge and change, aren't we? At the moment, there might get to a point where we don't need to challenge and change, but I think that's definitely where we are.
Definitely. I really like the term socially engaged practice. It's a bit of art speak that I kind of it kind of says something quite important for me. I'm not usually a fan of that kind of jargon, but sometimes it makes sense, and I think you've summed up perfectly the importance of disability art in creating change in the world, and in challenging society to understand that at the end of the day, disability is something that everyone is going to experience, and it'll be so much better for the non-disabled communities to understand it earlier in their lives than later. Actually, it won't be such a shock.
Yeah. As I think me and Jack Thorne was discussed around that thing, everybody's pre-disabled, which is true, isn't it? It's like, kind of get your heads around it now, and then you won't feel such a shock or whatever when it happens, because it's going to. That sounds really. It's going to happen, kids.
It's just around the corner.
Exactly.
That feels like a good note to bring our conversation to a close.
You're all going to become disabled. Love it. Embrace it. Be the change.
It's a creative opportunity. It is.
See? Well, thank you, Colin. It's been fantastic to do this and to kind of, go through the podcast archive and remind ourselves of the brilliant work that's gone on. Well done.
I know. I've been looking forward to having this chat with you for ages.
And it's just been fantastic to chat with you, Colin, and, in the work that you've been doing with Disability Arts. It's just, it's brilliant. So thank you.
Visit graeae.org and disabilityarts.online for details of productions, events, interviews, opinions, reviews, and learning opportunities.